Ladies and gentlemen, there's something profoundly dangerous about stupidity. It's not just an inconvenience, nor is it merely a limitation. It's a threat to an individual's potential, to the people around them, and ultimately to society itself. The worst part? Most people who operate in a state of stupidity have no idea that they are doing so, because real stupidity isn't just a lack of knowledge, it's a refusal to engage with reality in a meaningful way. Think about it. A person who is genuinely intelligent isn't just someone with a high IQ. It's someone who is willing to wrestle with the complexity of life, to confront uncomfortable truths, to challenge their own biases, and embrace the responsibility of growth. A stupid person, on the other hand, rejects that responsibility. They cling to their ignorance as if it were a shield, protecting them from the burden of self-awareness. And the consequences of this? They are profound. Stupidity leads to unnecessary suffering. It destroys potential. It makes life harder than it needs to be. And in an age where information is more accessible than ever before, there is no excuse for willful ignorance. There's something incredibly dangerous about the inability to admit when you're wrong. It's not just a small flaw or an occasional bad habit. It's a complete breakdown of growth, of wisdom, of genuine competence. A person who cannot say, "I don't know," is a person who has chosen stagnation over progress, because life is immensely complex. It is filled with variables we cannot fully understand, forces that shape us in ways we fail to recognize. And the moment someone decides they have it all figured out, that they are beyond questioning or correctionist, the moment they become trapped in their own ignorance. Think about this. The most intelligent people, the ones who are truly capable and competent, are the first to admit what they don't know. They understand the sheer magnitude of knowledge that exists beyond their grasp. They are curious. They seek out new ideas. They listen carefully. They challenge their own beliefs not because they enjoy being wrong, but because they understand that growth only comes through confrontation with the unknown. Contrast that with the person who clings to their own opinions with an iron grip, who reacts defensively when challenged, who would rather protect their fragile ego than engage in genuine learning. What does that kind of person become? Predictable, weak, incapable of adapting. They make the same mistakes over and over again, not because they are incapable of learning, but because they refuse to learn. And refusal to learn is not just a sign of arrogance, it's a sign of deep, fundamental stupidity. Imagine two people standing at the edge of an unfamiliar road. One says, "I've never been here before. I should check a map." The other says, "I don't need a map. I already know where I'm going." Who do you trust to reach their destination? Who do you think is more likely to get lost? This is how life works. The moment someone refuses to acknowledge their own ignorance, they have already lost. Because ignorance is not the enemy, arrogance is. Ignorance can be remedied. A person who does not know something but is willing to learn is in a much stronger position than someone who thinks they know everything and refuses to question themselves. And what happens when this kind of arrogance goes unchecked? It cripples relationships, it destroys careers, it shuts down opportunities, because no one wants to work with someone who cannot take feedback. No one wants to have a meaningful conversation with someone who only listens to their own voice. No one wants to rely on a person who is unwilling to change, even when the evidence is overwhelming. A person who lacks intellectual humility is not just dangerous to themselves. They are dangerous to everyone around them. They create environments where growth is impossible, where progress is blocked, where truth is distorted by the sheer weight of their own stubbornness. And in a world that is constantly shifting, that kind of rigidity is a death sentence. So what is the alternative? It's simple, but it's not easy. Admit what you don't know. Seek out knowledge. Question your own beliefs not just once, but constantly. Surround yourself with people who challenge you, who force you to think, who hold you accountable when you start to slip into arrogance. Because the only way to become truly wise is to first accept that you are, and always will be, incomplete. Those who refuse to acknowledge their limitations are doomed to be ruled by them. But those who embrace their own ignorance as an opportunity for growth will always rise above, and in the end, that is what separates the competent from the incapable. One of the most telling signs of an intellectually and emotionally immature person is their inability to take responsibility. It is not just a flaw, it is a catastrophic failure of character, and it has consequences that ripple through every part of their life. A person who refuses to take responsibility for their actions, their failures, and even their emotions is someone who has fundamentally abdicated control over their own existence. And what is left when you give up control? Chaos. Because responsibility is not just about admitting when you're wrong, it's about owning your life. It's about standing up, looking at the mess in front of you, and saying, "This is mine to fix." And that is no easy task. It is far easier to blame circumstances, to blame other people, to blame society, to blame fate, anything but yourself. But the moment you do that, you give up your power. You hand over control of your life to forces outside of yourself, and you become nothing more than a victim of circumstance. And that's the thing. People who refuse to take responsibility for their own lives don't realize they are voluntarily choosing weakness. They believe they are avoiding pain, avoiding discomfort, avoiding shame. But what they are actually doing is trapping themselves in mediocrity, because without responsibility, there is no growth, there is no progress, there is no transformation. There is only the same pattern, repeating endlessly, because nothing ever changes until you decide to change it. Think about how this plays out in real life. Someone loses their job, do they ask themselves what they could have done better, how they could improve, what lessons they need to learn? Or do they immediately blame their boss, their coworkers, the economy, the system? Someone's relationship falls apart, do they reflect on their own behavior, their own flaws, their own shortcomings? Or do they tell themselves it was all the other person's fault? The same thing happens with health, with finances, with every single aspect of life. The people who take responsibility, real responsibility, are the ones who grow, who adapt, who overcome. The ones who don't, they stay stuck. They become bitter, resentful, angry. And worst of all, they become powerless. And that is the true tragedy of it. Because if you refuse to take responsibility, you will spend your life at the mercy of things beyond your control. You will never build the kind of resilience, the kind of competence, the kind of strength that allows you to shape your own destiny. You will always be waiting for someone else to change, for the world to become fairer, for your circumstances to improve, and that will never happen. The world will not bend itself to your will. The only thing you can change is yourself. And here's the harsh truth. The people who refuse to take responsibility become burdens to those around them. They drain the energy of the people who love them. They weigh down their friends, their family, their colleagues, because no one wants to be around someone who always has an excuse, who never learns, who refuses to grow. People respect those who take ownership of their lives. They admire those who can stand up and say, "This is my fault, and I will fix it." That is the kind of person others want to follow, to support, to invest in. And it is not just about external respect, it is about internal strength. Because when you take responsibility for your own life, you give yourself power. You become the kind of person who can handle adversity, who can adapt to change, who can navigate the chaos of the world with confidence, and that is worth everything. That is the foundation of success, of wisdom, of genuine self-respect. So the choice is simple. You can take responsibility, embrace the challenge of growth, and build a life of strength and competence, or you can avoid it, blame others, and remain weak. But understand this, no one is coming to save you. If you want your life to change, you must be the one to change it. There is no other way. A defining trait of an intellectually limited person is their absolute certainty that they know everything. They are utterly convinced of their own intelligence, their own correctness, their own infallibility. And that is precisely what makes them fools. Because genuine intelligence, real wisdom, comes from the recognition of ignorance. It comes from the understanding that there is always more to learn, always more to understand, always perspectives you have yet to consider. But the foolish mind does not think this way. The foolish mind is closed-rigid, stubborn, incapable of absorbing new information because it is so desperately attached to its own narrow worldview. This is a dangerous way to exist because it leaves no room for growth. If you already believe you know everything, then what is there to improve? What is there to change? Nothing. And that is why foolish people remain stagnant. They cling to outdated beliefs, to flawed ideas, to half-truths and misconceptions, because they are too proud to admit they might be wrong. And pride, when it is unearned, when it is delusional, is one of the most destructive forces a person can invite into their life. You see this kind of arrogance everywhere. You see it in people who dismiss opinions before even hearing them, who refuse to engage in honest debate, who mock and belittle instead of listening and learning. And what drives this behavior? Fear. A deep, underlying fear that if they were to truly open their minds, if they were to entertain the possibility that they might be wrong, their entire identity would crumble. Because for many, their opinions are not just opinions, they are a shield. A fragile, brittle shield that protects them from the uncomfortable reality that they might not be as smart, as capable, as insightful as they believe themselves to be. And that is a tragic way to live, because it means you are constantly defending ignorance instead of pursuing wisdom. It means you are limiting your potential instead of expanding it. It means you are choosing to be blind rather than daring to see. And that choice, that stubborn refusal to engage with reality leads to suffering. It leads to missed opportunities, failed relationships, professional stagnation, and personal disappointment. Because reality does not care about your opinions, does not care about how much you believe you are right. It simply is. And if you refuse to align yourself with truth, you will be crushed by it. The people who succeed in life, the people who genuinely grow, are the ones who embrace the discomfort of learning. They are the ones who are willing to admit, I don't know everything, and that's why I must keep learning. They surround themselves with people who challenge them, with books that broaden their perspective, with experiences that force them to adapt. They do not shy away from difficult conversations. They do not dismiss ideas simply because they make them uncomfortable. They seek truth, not comfort, and that makes all the difference. But the foolish person does the opposite. They avoid intellectual discomfort at all costs. They surround themselves with echo chambers, with people who tell them exactly what they want to hear, who reinforce their preconceived notions, who never challenge them to think critically. They do not seek knowledge, they seek validation. And validation, when it is unearned, is nothing more than an illusion, a trap that keeps people weak, small, and afraid. This is why true wisdom requires humility, the ability to say, I don't know everything, the ability to admit mistakes, to change your mind, to recognize when you have been blind to something important. This is not a weakness, it is a strength. It is what allows people to become better, more capable, more competent, more aware. It is what separates those who rise from those who remain stuck in mediocrity. So the real question is this: do you want to be right or do you want to be better? Do you want to defend your ignorance or do you want to expand your wisdom? Because you cannot do both. The choice is yours. A person's ability to navigate the world is deeply connected to their capacity for self-awareness. And yet, one of the most glaring signs of intellectual and emotional immaturity is the inability to reflect. A person who does not examine their own actions, who does not question their own assumptions, who does not challenge their own biases, is someone who will remain trapped, stuck in the same destructive patterns, making the same mistakes over and over again. Because growth, real growth, comes from brutal honesty with oneself. It comes from the ability to say, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I could have handled that better. Maybe there is something I need to change. But people who refuse to do this, who refuse to turn their gaze inward, inevitably find themselves at war with the world, blaming everything and everyone for their misfortunes, instead of taking responsibility for their own lives. This is a mindset rooted in weakness. It is the mindset of someone who would rather point fingers than do the hard work of self-improvement. It is the mindset of someone who wants to believe they are a victim, rather than admit that their choices, their failures, their limitations, their blind spots are their own responsibility. And that kind of thinking leads to bitterness. It leads to resentment. It leads to a deep, underlying dissatisfaction with life, because a person who never looks inward is doomed to repeat their failures indefinitely. And you see this everywhere. People who cycle through the same problems in their relationships, blaming their partners instead of addressing their own flaws. People who jump from job to job, convinced that their bosses or coworkers are the problem, never stopping to ask, what am I doing wrong? People who fall into the same destructive habits, the same emotional reactions, the same self-sabotage over and over again, and they never connect the dots. They never recognize that the common denominator in all of their struggles is them. Now, that is a difficult thing to accept. It is uncomfortable, it is painful, but it is also necessary. Because the moment you take responsibility for your life, the moment you stop blaming external circumstances and start asking, what can I do to be better? That is the moment you begin to transform. That is the moment you reclaim power over your own existence. Because as long as you are blaming the world, you are saying, I am powerless. You are saying, I have no control over my own life. And that is simply not true. You always have control. You always have a choice. But that choice begins with self-awareness. And the people who lack this awareness, the people who never engage in honest self-reflection, are not only a danger to themselves, but a danger to everyone around them. Because they bring chaos, they bring instability, they bring drama and conflict and negativity into the lives of others, because they have not done the work of understanding themselves. And when a person does not understand themselves, they become reactive, they lash out, they misunderstand, they assume the worst. They distort reality to fit their own unchecked narratives, and in doing so, they create suffering for themselves and for everyone who crosses their path. That is why intelligence is not just about knowledge. It is not just about book smarts or academic achievement. True intelligence is about wisdom. It is about the ability to see yourself clearly, to recognize your own weaknesses, to acknowledge your own blind spots, and to work every single day to be better. And that takes humility. It takes the willingness to say, I don't know everything. I have flaws. I have work to do. And the people who are capable of this are the people who grow. They are the people who build meaningful relationships. They are the people who find success not just externally, but internally, because they have mastered the most difficult thing of all, themselves. There is a profound difference between confidence and arrogance, though many fail to recognize it. Confidence is built on competence, on a foundation of real ability, hard-won experience, and genuine understanding. It is earned through discipline, sacrifice, and an unrelenting commitment to the truth. Arrogance, on the other hand, is hollow. It is an illusion of fragile, desperate attempt to appear competent, rather than actually being competent. And the most dangerous aspect of arrogance is that it blinds people to their own ignorance. It convinces them that they already know everything, that they have nothing left to learn, and that they are superior to those who challenge them. That is a catastrophic way to exist. People who operate from arrogance refuse to listen. They reject criticism even when it is constructive. They see every disagreement as an attack, every opposing viewpoint as a threat. And so they shut down conversations, they refuse to engage with new ideas, and they isolate themselves in an echo chamber of their own certainty. But what happens when you stop listening? You stop learning. And when you stop learning, you stop growing. And when you stop growing, you become stagnant. You become trapped in outdated beliefs, bad habits, and flawed perceptions of the world that no longer serve you. And this is why arrogance is so destructive. It prevents growth, it blocks wisdom, it cripples progress, because a person who cannot admit when they are wrong, who cannot acknowledge when they are ignorant about something, will never seek to improve. They will never seek to understand. And so, rather than evolving into someone stronger, more capable, more insightful, they become defensive. They lash out at those who challenge them. They double down on their mistakes, their misconceptions, their false assumptions, because their pride is more important to them than the truth. This is why truly wise individuals remain humble, not weak, not passive, not submissive, but humble. They recognize that there is always more to learn. They recognize that no matter how much they know, there will always be something they do not understand. And instead of resenting that fact, they embrace it. They remain open. They remain willing to listen, to be challenged, to admit when they are wrong, because they value growth over ego. They value truth over validation. They are not concerned with appearing smart. They are concerned with actually becoming smarter. And that is an entirely different mindset. But arrogance disguises itself well. It often masquerades as confidence. It presents itself as strength, when in reality, it is a defense mechanism. It is a fragile shield used to protect a deeply insecure core. Because real confidence does not need to boast. It does not need to prove itself. It does not need to dominate or belittle others. Real confidence speaks through actions, not arrogance. It is quiet, it is assured, it does not crumble under criticism because it is built on something real. And that is the greatest tragedy of arrogance. It robs people of their potential. It keeps them locked in a false sense of superiority, while the truly wise continue to grow, to evolve, to surpass them. Because those who are willing to listen, to learn, to challenge themselves, will always outgrow those who believe they already know everything. And that is the ultimate downfall of arrogance. It ensures that the person who clings to it never truly improves. There's a dangerous assumption that many people make that their opinions, their worldview, and their understanding of reality are fixed, immovable, beyond question. But that assumption is a symptom of something far more insidious: intellectual laziness. It's easy to assume that you already know everything worth knowing, that your beliefs are unshakable, that your judgments are infallible. It's far harder to admit that you might be wrong, that you might be missing something, that you might have blind spots, biases, or fundamental misunderstandings about the world. But those who refuse to question themselves, those who refuse to challenge their own assumptions, fall into the trap of self-deception. And the deeper that trap becomes, the harder it is to escape. Because once you convince yourself that you have nothing left to learn, you stop looking for truth. You stop growing. You become stagnant. Worse still, you become fragile. Because the moment someone confronts you with an argument you haven't considered, or a perspective that contradicts your own, you won't know how to handle it. And instead of engaging with the idea, instead of learning something, you'll react with defensiveness, with anger, with arrogance. You'll reject the truth not because it's false, but because it threatens your sense of certainty. And that's the defining characteristic of a fool. They fear being wrong more than they desire to be right. They care more about preserving their fragile ego than they do about discovering reality. And so, instead of facing their ignorance head on, they surround themselves with people who will reinforce their delusions, who will validate their misconceptions, who will tell them that they are already wise, already knowledgeable, already enlightened, but that's not strength. That's cowardice. Because true strength is the ability to look at yourself honestly, to confront your own flaws, to admit your own ignorance, and those who cannot do that are doomed to repeat their mistakes over and over again without ever understanding why. And this is where arrogance becomes catastrophic, because it doesn't just blind people to their own ignorance, it actively prevents them from improving. When you cannot acknowledge that you might be wrong, you will never take the necessary steps to become right. When you refuse to recognize your weaknesses, you will never develop real strength. When you are too proud to listen, you will never learn. And so, those who live in arrogance fool themselves into believing they are wise, while those who are truly wise are constantly learning, constantly evolving, constantly refining their understanding of the world. That's why humility is not weakness. It is a foundation for strength, not passivity, not submission, but the willingness to learn, to grow, to improve. And those who embrace that mindset will always surpass those who reject it. Because knowledge is not something you possess, it is something you pursue. And the moment you stop pursuing it, you start falling behind. That is the brutal, inescapable reality of life. So the question is simple. Do you want to be right, or do you want to feel right? Do you want to actually understand the world, or do you just want to protect your ego? That decision will determine everything about the kind of person you become. The difference between wisdom and foolishness is not intelligence, it is attitude. A wise person seeks truth, even at the cost of their own pride, while a fool clings to their illusions, afraid of being wrong. The unwillingness to question oneself, the refusal to grow, and the arrogance of believing one already knows everything, these are the hallmarks of stagnation. True strength lies in humility, in the relentless pursuit of understanding, in the courage to admit ignorance and strive for knowledge. The choice is yours. Stay blind in false certainty, or open your eyes and grow.